After the shootout, town gave a cowboy an Apache woman, but he chose another path. The sun was just beginning to rise over the dusty horizon, casting a warm golden light on the small frontier town of Silver Creek. The town was quiet in the early hours, with only the distant clatter of a horse's hooves on the wooden streets and the occasional creak of a swinging sign announcing the general store. The buildings, mostly wooden with faded paint, looked worn but sturdy, each telling the story of lives built on grit and determination. It was the kind of place where everyone knew everyone else, where news traveled fast, and where a single man's reputation could shape how people thought of him. Eli Thompson, a tall, broad-shouldered cowboy with eyes that seemed to have seen more than most men ever would, leaned against the wooden railing of the small saloon, sipping a cup of strong coffee. His face, weathered from years under the harsh sun, carried both the scars of past battles and the calm of a man who had learned to read the world carefully. He wasn't a man who sought trouble, but trouble had a way of finding him. Eli had spent much of his life on the open plains, riding from town to town, working wherever there was need for a steady hand, and living by a code he rarely spoke of, but always followed. Life in Silver Creek had always been tense. The town was built near the edge of Apache territory, and while the two groups had learned to live in a fragile peace, old wounds lingered. Stories of skirmishes and raids still circulated, whispered in dark corners of the saloon, or shared in hushed tones outside the general store. Some of the townspeople were veterans of these conflicts, carrying memories that made them wary of any unfamiliar face. Yet there was also a sense of resilience in Silver Creek. The people had endured hardships, droughts, and violence, but they kept going. They built their homes, their families, and their small businesses, and they held on to the hope that one day life might feel a little less dangerous. Eli's presence in Silver Creek was both familiar and quietly remarkable. Unlike other cowboys who roamed simply for adventure or profit, Eli carried a calm authority, the kind that came from experience and reflection.
He had arrived in town a few weeks earlier, drawn not by any particular work or bounty, but simply by the rhythm of the place, the way the town seemed to hold its own against the endless challenges of the frontier. People noticed him immediately, not because he demanded attention, but because he seemed to move through the world with a steady purpose.
Children would watch him from a distance, fascinated by the way he handled his horse, the ease with which he could calm even the most restless animals, and the quiet confidence in his movements. Though Eli spent much of his time outdoors, he also had a keen sense of people. He could read a situation quickly, sensing tension before it erupted and knowing when to step in or step back. This skill had saved lives on more than one occasion, and it was part of what made him respected in Silver Creek even before anyone truly knew him. People would talk about the quiet cowboy who seemed to understand the heart of the town, who didn't just rely on his gun but also on his intelligence and empathy. That morning, as Eli finished his coffee, he noticed a group of children playing near the edge of the creek. Their laughter floated on the crisp air, a sound so rare in the midst of hardship that it made him smile. He remembered his own childhood, growing up in a different part of the frontier, where danger often outweighed joy, and where a child's laughter was a fleeting treasure. Eli had been orphaned young, forced to learn survival at an early age. But life had taught him harsh lessons, but it had also instilled in him a respect for moments of innocence and happiness. Seeing the children now, he felt a quiet hope that some parts of life could remain untouched by the chaos that often surrounded people in towns like Silver Creek. Silver Creek's streets began to stir as merchants opened their shops and townspeople started their daily routines. The blacksmith hammered metal in his forge, sparks flying like tiny stars into the morning light. A group of women swept the streets, trying to keep the dust at bay, while others carried buckets of water from the well, chatting quietly about the news of the day. Despite the calm exterior, Eli could sense the underlying tension. Rumors of trouble on the outskirts of town had reached his ears. Rumors of a gang of outlaws moving through nearby territories. Rumors of disagreements between settlers and native tribes. Rumors that sometimes carried more weight than the truth. Eli didn't react with fear or anger. he reacted with preparation. He knew that the frontier demanded readiness, a mind that could anticipate danger, and a body that could act swiftly when necessary. But unlike others who thrived on the adrenaline of conflict, Eli's approach was measured. He believed in balance. A man could survive the wild only if he understood it, respected it, and made choices guided by both courage and wisdom. As the sun climbed higher, Eli walked through the town square, nodding to familiar faces and observing the rhythm of life. Children ran past him, chasing a ball, while the town sheriff, a burly man with a stern face softened by years of protecting his people, tipped his hat in acknowledgement. Eli noticed how everyone, despite differences and past grievances, seemed to share an unspoken agreement. Survival required community, and even in a harsh land, people needed one another. Yet Eli also knew that danger was never far. He had spent enough years in towns like this to understand that peace was fragile. One wrong move, one spark of anger, and everything could erupt into chaos. But he also knew that it was not the presence of danger that defined a man, but how he responded to it.
And Eli had always responded with integrity.
He didn't kill for sport. He didn't seek fame. He acted to protect those who could not protect themselves and to maintain a sense of justice that often went unnoticed in the eyes of others. By midday, the town began to buzz with rumors of an impending threat. People whispered about a group of bandits who might be approaching, and while many panicked, Eli's expression remained calm. He walked to the edge of town, checking the terrain, observing the hills and the open plains that surrounded Silver Creek. He thought about the possibilities, calculating risks, considering strategies, not for glory, but for the simple fact that lives might depend on his decisions. Bah! Eli's character, shaped by years of wandering, by moments of hardship and reflection, made him different from most men in Silver Creek. He carried a sense of quiet authority, a respect for life, and a willingness to act when needed, but never without thought. People noticed it, some admired it, and some felt unsettled by it.
In a town where strength was often measured by the speed of a gun or the willingness to fight, Eli showed that true strength could also be measured by patience, understanding, and the courage to stand by one's principles.
As the sun began to dip toward the horizon, casting long shadows across the wooden streets, Eli returned to the saloon. The warm light of the interior welcomed him. The smell of strong coffee and fresh bread filling the air. Townspeople gathered, sharing stories and news, laughing where they could, and silently preparing for the challenges that tomorrow might bring. Eli sat quietly, listening, observing and letting the world unfold around him. Little did anyone know, the quiet cowboy they had come to respect would soon face a test unlike any before. A test that would challenge not just his skill with a gun, but his very understanding of justice, respect, and what it meant to be a man in a world filled with both danger and opportunity. And it would begin with a single moment, a spark that would ignite events capable of changing the life of Silver Creek forever. Eli Thompson, the quiet, strong, thoughtful cowboy, was about to step into a story that would test every principle he held dear, and in doing so, leave a mark on the town and its people that would be remembered long after the dust had settled. The calm of Silver Creek didn't last long. As the next day dawned, the town slowly began to stir with whispers and uneasy glances. Eli Thompson, the quiet cowboy who had become a familiar presence, noticed it immediately. There was a tension in the air, something heavier than the usual dust and sun. People hurried along the wooden streets with purposeful steps, casting quick looks over their shoulders. Mothers gathered their children close, merchants checked locks and doors, and even the sheriff, a man who had faced many dangers, walked with a hand hovering near his holster. It began with small signs. A few wagons had appeared on the outskirts of town, their drivers looking anxious, speaking in hushed tones. Travelers passing through spoke of strangers seen in the hills, men with rough faces and a reckless air. Rumors spread quickly, as they always did in Silver Creek. Some said it was a gang of outlaws moving south, robbing isolated homesteads. Others whispered that there were new tensions with nearby Apache groups, though no one could say for certain. The town felt a quiet hum of fear, the kind that builds slowly until it seems to press down on everyone at once. Pit. Eli, however, walked through it all with the same steady calm he had always carried. He understood fear. It was natural, even useful, but he also knew that panic could destroy a town faster than any gang of outlaws. He paused outside the saloon, watching a few young men practice with their pistols in the dusty square. Their shots rang out unevenly, some bullets hitting targets while others flew harmlessly into the dirt. Eli approached them quietly, his presence alone commanding attention. "You need control," he said in his calm, low voice. "Strength isn't just about speed. It's about knowing when to act and how to act. You waste your bullets without thinking, and that will get someone hurt." The young men nodded, humbled. They had heard tales of Eli's skill but had never realized how precise he was, not just with his gun but with his words, his judgment, and his understanding of people. Eli's reputation grew that day, quietly, as a man who didn't just survive the frontier. He taught it how to survive too. But the rising tension could not be avoided. By midday, a rider approached the town from the hills, kicking up dust and carrying a sense of urgency. He was a scout from the nearby settlement, a man with sunburned skin and eyes wide with worry. Breath. He brought news that made the town hold its breath. A group of outlaws known for their ruthless ways had been spotted moving towards Silver Creek. They were heavily armed, and their path suggested that the town might be their next target. The sheriff called an immediate meeting in the town hall. The townspeople gathered, some standing with hands on their hips, others leaning against the walls, listening intently. Eli sat near the back, observing quietly, letting the others speak first. The sheriff outlined the situation, his voice steady but grave.
"We need to be ready. They are dangerous, and we cannot assume they will pass us by."
"We must plan carefully."
Every able-bodied person will need to help protect the town. Murmurs spread across the room.
Some townspeople argued about the best course of action, while others questioned whether it was worth confronting the outlaws at all. But Eli remained calm. When it was his turn to speak, he stood slowly, his eyes scanning the room.
"We don't know exactly what they will do," he said.
"But we do know this. We protect what matters. That's our homes, our families, and each other.
If we act wisely, we can defend the town without needless bloodshed. Panic won't help, and neither will rushing in blindly."
The crowd listened, some nodding, others skeptical, but all were affected by the quiet authority in his voice. Eli suggested organizing lookouts on the hills, barricading vulnerable areas of the town, and keeping the women and children safely inside their homes. He also volunteered to ride out to scout the terrain to see if there was a way to anticipate the outlaws' movements before they reached the town square. As he prepared to leave, he mounted his horse, the leather creaking beneath him. But time, seeing the fear, determination, and uncertainty etched on everyone's faces, Eli knew that this moment was a test, not just of skill, but of character. He had faced danger before, but this was different. It was not a duel with a single man or a fight over land. It was about protecting an entire community, about making decisions that could mean life or death for dozens of people. Wait. Riding out into the hills, Eli's senses sharpened. Every movement of the grass, every distant sound, every shift in the wind carried meaning. He rode with care, scanning the terrain, looking for any sign of the approaching gang. Hours passed, and the sun climbed higher, turning the plains into a shimmering sea of heat. Eli found tracks in the dirt, fresh, deep impressions that showed a group moving quickly and deliberately. He followed them cautiously, noting the direction and estimating their numbers. By evening, he returned to Silver Creek with the grim news. The outlaws were indeed heading straight for the town, and they were numerous enough that caution was essential. The sheriff and Eli devised a plan. Barricades were reinforced, the men prepared their weapons, and the town's residents were instructed to remain calm yet vigilant. Every detail mattered. Eli even spent time helping the older men and boys understand the layout of the town, where to take cover, and how to move safely if the outlaws attempted to attack. Despite all the preparation, the air was heavy with tension. That night, Eli walked through the streets, listening to the quiet. The usual sounds of nocturnal wildlife and the occasional creak of the saloon doors were amplified by the knowledge that danger was near. He paused outside the general store, seeing a young boy peering out through the window, wide-eyed and fearful. Eli knelt, placing a reassuring hand on the boy's shoulder. "Don't be afraid," he said softly. "Courage isn't about not being scared. It's about knowing what's right and standing by it."
We're ready, and we'll face whatever comes together.
Morning came with a pale, uneasy light. The town was quiet, too quiet, as if holding its breath. Eli stood near the center of the square, watching the horizon for any sign of the approaching threat. Hours passed, and the sun climbed higher, casting long shadows. Then in the distance, a cloud of dust appeared on the plains, growing larger with every passing minute. The outlaws were coming, and their presence was undeniable. The townspeople readied themselves, following the plans Eli and the sheriff had laid out. Every man took his position, every barricade was checked, and the women and children stayed in the safety of their homes, hearts pounding but trustful of the preparations.
Eli took a deep breath, feeling the weight of responsibility on his shoulders. Yet, despite the fear and uncertainty, he also felt a strange calm.
He had faced danger before, and he had learned that fear, when managed with courage and wisdom, could become a guide rather than a burden. The outlaws rode into view, their faces grim and their intent clear. They were fast, well-armed, and confident in their power. But Silver Creek was not unprepared. Eli, standing tall and focused, gave the signal to the town guards. The air crackled with tension, the quiet before the storm. Every heartbeat seemed louder than the last, every breath heavier. The moment of confrontation had arrived, and the future of the town rested on the courage, skill, and decisions of those who were ready to protect it. Eli's mind was sharp, his body ready, and his spirit resolute. He knew that what came next would test him, not just as a cowboy or a gunslinger, but as a man who had committed himself to a code of justice and protection. The outlaws had chosen to bring chaos, but Silver Creek, guided by the calm wisdom of one man who understood both fear and courage, would face them with unity and resolve. And so, as the dust cloud approached and the sun shone down on the tense streets, Eli Thompson prepared for the challenge that would mark the town forever. It was a test of skill, yes, but also of character, a test that would reveal the true nature of heroism, the value of integrity, and the strength found in defending not just oneself, but an entire community. The day of reckoning arrived with a strange stillness over Silver Creek. The sun hung high in the sky, casting a harsh light on the dusty streets, and the town seemed to hold its breath. Eli Thompson stood at the center of the square, his eyes scanning the horizon, his hand resting near the grip of his revolver. Though he was calm outwardly, he felt the weight of responsibility pressing down on him like a heavy stone. Every man, woman, and child in Silver Creek looked to him for guidance, and he knew that any misstep could have consequences beyond imagination. The dust cloud on the horizon grew larger, revealing the outlaws in all their threatening presence. They were a formidable group, hardened by years of lawlessness and confident in their power to intimidate towns. Their leader, a man known only as Cutter, rode at the front, his dark eyes scanning the town with the mixture of calculation and cruelty. He had heard of Silver Creek's preparations and the talk of a heroic cowboy, but he dismissed it as exaggeration. To him, the town was just another obstacle in his path. Eli took a deep breath, centering himself. He remembered every lesson the frontier had taught him. Patience, observation, courage, and the importance of protecting those who could not protect themselves. He thought of the children playing by the creek the day before, of the women sweeping the streets, and of the townspeople who had looked to him with trust and hope. Their lives depended on the choices he made in the next moments, and he refused to let fear cloud his judgment. The first confrontation was subtle, almost quiet. A few of the outlaws dismounted near the edge of town, moving carefully, as if testing the defenses. Eli had anticipated this and had positioned several townsmen behind barricades and in hidden vantage points. He called out to them in a low, calm voice, giving precise instructions. Breath. Every detail mattered. The angle of a rifle, the timing of a shot, the movement of a guard. Suddenly, the outlaws made a bold move, charging toward the town's center with guns raised. Eli drew his revolver with swift precision, his movements deliberate and measured. He fired a warning shot, not to harm, but to assert control. The sharp crack echoed through the streets, stopping the first wave of outlaws in their tracks. For a moment, silence returned, broken only by the wind and the faint whinny of horses. Then Cutter stepped forward, raising his hands in a gesture meant to intimidate yet oddly formal. "You're the one they call Eli Thompson," he said, his voice carrying over the square. "I've heard stories. Let's see if you live up to them." Eli didn't flinch. He kept his revolver steady, his eyes locked on Cutter's. "This town is not yours," he said. "You can leave, or you can face what comes from attacking people who are not your enemies." His words were calm, firm, and carried the weight of conviction. Cutter laughed, a harsh, bitter sound. "Bask, you think you can stop me? You and these people? You don't know the world out there, cowboy. Out there, only the strong survive." But Eli did know the world. He had seen strength and cruelty, kindness and cowardice. He had lived in places where men were forced to fight for every inch of land, every drop of water, every scrap of life. And he had learned that true strength was not measured by fear, intimidation, or violence alone. It was measured by courage, judgment, and the willingness to stand for what was right, even when no one was watching. The standoff lasted long enough for tension to build to its peak, but townspeople held their positions, watching, waiting, and trusting Eli to guide them through the danger. Children were hidden safely, and the older men gripped their rifles with white-knuckled determination. Every heart beat faster, every breath was heavier, and every eye followed Eli's movements. Then came the first real clash. A young outlaw, impatient and reckless, charged toward the barricade where some of the townsmen were positioned. Eli moved swiftly, intercepting the man with a precise shot that disarmed him without causing fatal harm. The outlaw fell to the ground, clutching his arm in shock, and the other men hesitated. It was a small but significant victory, proof that control, skill, and strategy could overcome recklessness. Cutter, however, was not deterred. He signaled his men to press forward, and the conflict escalated into a tense firefight. Bullets ricocheted off wooden posts. Dust kicked up around the square, and the air was thick with the sound of gunfire and shouted commands. Yet throughout it all, Eli remained focused. He moved with a balance of caution and precision, positioning himself to protect both his people and himself. His actions were not reckless heroics. They were calculated, intelligent, and effective. During the chaos, Eli noticed a figure moving with determination near the edge of town. It was a young woman, Nayeli, from the nearby Apache territory. Bah! She had come to warn the town of another danger. Some of Cutter's men had broken off from the main group, intending to flank Silver Creek and catch the townspeople by surprise. Eli recognized the courage in her eyes and nodded subtly. Together, without words, they coordinated a way to protect the town from the hidden threat. The combined efforts of Eli, Naeli, and the townspeople began to turn the tide. The outlaws, confident in their initial advantage, found themselves blocked, disoriented, and increasingly cautious. Eli used his knowledge of the land, the positions of the buildings, and the layout of the streets to anticipate their movements. Every defensive action was deliberate, each one designed to minimize harm while asserting control. Hours passed and the sun began its descent, casting long shadows across the town. The outlaws, exhausted and frustrated, realized that Silver Creek was no ordinary settlement. It was a community prepared, guided by a man who understood more than just fighting best. Cutter's confidence began to crack, and his men followed his lead with hesitation. What had seemed like an unstoppable force was now confronted with determination, strategy, and courage that they had not anticipated. But, finally, the turning point came. Cutter, frustrated and enraged, attempted a bold move to capture the town's center. Eli anticipated this. With Naeli's guidance, he positioned himself and several guards in a hidden spot overlooking the square. When Cutter and his men advanced, Eli's shot rang out, precise and deliberate. It struck the ground near Cutter's horse, causing the animal to rear and throwing its rider to the side. The sudden disruption gave the townspeople the advantage, allowing them to defend key points and drive the outlaws back. The outlaws, disheartened and unable to regain control, began to retreat.
Cutter, realizing his plan had failed, turned his horse and galloped away with what remained of his group. Dust and silence filled the square once more.
The town had survived not because of sheer strength alone, but because of strategy, courage, and the guidance of a man who understood the true meaning of protection and responsibility. In the aftermath, the townspeople gathered in the center of Silver Creek, shaken but relieved.
There were no deaths, only minor injuries, and a renewed sense of unity. Eli moved through the crowd quietly, checking on each person, ensuring that everyone was safe.
Children clung to their parents, eyes wide with both fear and awe, and the adults exchanged looks of gratitude and respect for the cowboy who had guided them through danger.
It was in that moment that the town made a decision.
They had seen Eli's bravery, his skill, and his unwavering moral compass, and they wanted to honor him in the way they knew best. In a gesture that seemed fitting to their frontier minds, they decided to reward him with a gift, a young Apache woman, Naeli, believing it was a suitable gesture for a hero of his stature.
Eli, however, felt a wave of conflict wash over him.
He had grown to respect Naeli for her courage, intelligence, and autonomy. She was not a prize, and he knew that accepting such a reward would betray the very principles he had defended that day. For the first time, the weight of expectation pressed heavily on him in a different way, not from danger, but from society. He looked at Naeli, who met his eyes with understanding. She had faced her own share of hardships, navigating a world that often sought to limit her freedom. And now, faced with the town's misguided intentions, she remained calm and resolute. Eli realized that true courage was not just about facing outlaws. It was also about making the right choice when tradition, expectation, and pressure threatened to compromise integrity. As the sun set behind the hills, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, Eli made his decision. He would not accept the town's reward. He would honor Naeli's autonomy and his own principles, even if it meant defying the expectations of everyone around him. That choice, he knew, would mark the true turning point, not just in the battle against the outlaws, but in the story of Silver Creek itself.
It was a moment that defined Eli Thompson, not as a gunslinger or hero by legend, but as a man of conscience, integrity, and unwavering moral courage. And as night fell, the town began to understand that heroism was not measured by rewards or accolades. It was measured by the choices one made, even when no one else understood.
The days following the battle in Silver Creek were quiet, but the calm was fragile. The townspeople had survived the attack, yet the air still carried the tension of what had almost been. Mothers whispered to their children about the courage they had seen, and fathers spoke in low tones about the lessons learned from the confrontation. Eli Thompson, the quiet cowboy who had led them through danger, moved through the town with the same steady presence he had shown before the fight. But beneath his calm exterior, he felt a new kind of pressure. The town had made their decision to reward him with Nayeli, the young Apache woman whose courage had helped turn the tide of the battle.
The gesture, meant to honor him, now weighed heavily on Ellie.
He could not accept a person as a reward. Nayeli was brave, strong, and capable. She was a person, not a prize. But he also knew that speaking against the town's decision would not be easy. Many people admired him, yes, but few understood his principles fully. In their minds, he had earned something tangible, something that showed gratitude for his heroism. Eli found himself at a crossroads. On one hand, he could bow to the town's expectations and accept the reward, avoiding conflict and pleasing the majority. On the other hand, he could stand by his principles, honor Nayeli's autonomy, and potentially face misunderstanding, anger, or even resentment from those who could not see beyond tradition. Eli's hands itched for work, for action, but this time the challenge was moral, not physical. It was a test of character, one that would shape not only his life but the town's understanding of courage, justice, and respect. Nayeli herself had sensed the town's intentions, but she remained calm and resolute. She had grown up in harsh conditions, learning to navigate a world where strength and intelligence determined survival. Yet even she understood that this situation was delicate. She did not want to appear ungrateful or disrespectful, but she also would not allow herself to be treated as property. When Eli approached her quietly, away from the prying eyes of the townspeople, their conversation was simple but profound. "You don't belong to them," Eli said softly, his voice carrying the weight of sincerity. "And neither do I claim you. No one should ever be offered as a prize." "That's not honor. That's shame." Nayeli nodded, her eyes steady and clear. "I came here to help, not to be rewarded," she said. "I will not let anyone take my freedom, and I will not let anyone question your integrity for defending it." Their understanding did not go unnoticed, though few in town grasped its depth. Rumors began to spread. Some questioned Eli's intentions, wondering why he refused such a gift. Others quietly admired his decision, seeing that bravery was not just about winning a fight, but also about making the right choice when confronted with difficult moral dilemmas. Eli did not argue with the skeptics. He simply lived by his principles, letting his actions speak louder than words. Life in Silver Creek slowly returned to routine, yet the echoes of the battle and the moral confrontation lingered. Eli continued his daily work, helping the townspeople repair damage, tending to livestock, and teaching younger men how to handle firearms responsibly. He also took time to understand Nayeli better, not as a reward, but as a person. They spoke of their lives, their struggles, and their experiences in a world that often demanded more than it gave. Through these conversations, Eli realized that courage and wisdom were not limited to men with guns. Nayeli's insights, her resourcefulness, and her steadfastness were just as valuable in shaping the town's future. Despite the calm, challenges remained. The outlaws who had attacked the town were not gone forever. Some returned to the hills plotting, while others sought new opportunities to assert control over settlements nearby. Eli knew that Silver Creek could face danger again, but he also knew that preparation, intelligence, and unity could overcome threats. He began to focus on training the townspeople not just to defend themselves physically, but to understand strategy, observation, and the importance of making decisions guided by both courage and judgment. As weeks passed, the town slowly began to accept Eli's refusal of the reward. Some elders grumbled quietly, unable to understand the principle behind his choice. Younger townspeople, however, watched with growing admiration. They saw that true heroism was not measured by gifts or accolades, but by integrity, respect, and the courage to act rightly even against societal expectations.
Eli became a quiet teacher, a guide whose influence was subtle but profound.
During this period, Eli faced his own internal growth. He reflected on the life he had lived, the years spent wandering the frontier, the battles fought, the losses endured, and realized that his sense of morality and justice had been tested more than once. Yet this challenge was different. It was not about survival against an enemy with guns. It was about survival against ignorance, tradition, and societal pressure. He understood that true strength required patience, self-control, and unwavering commitment to one's principles. Nayeli's presence became an important part of this growth. She shared stories of her people, their customs, and their struggles. She spoke of resilience, community, and the quiet power of knowledge and courage. Eli listened and learned, realizing that heroism and leadership were not solitary achievements. They were built through collaboration, respect, and the ability to see value in others. Together they became a symbol of what Silver Creek could become, a community guided by wisdom, courage, and integrity. The town itself began to change, slowly and quietly. Conversations that had once been dominated by tradition and fear began to include discussions about respect, fairness, and moral courage. Children learned from Eli and Nayeli, absorbing lessons that went beyond survival skills. They learned about empathy, about standing up for what was right, and about the importance of protecting the vulnerable. Adults, too, began to reconsider their assumptions and prejudices, seeing that strength was not measured solely by force, but by wisdom and moral clarity.
Yet not all was easy. Some townspeople still murmured behind Eli's back, questioning his refusal of the reward.
Cutter and his men who had escaped during the battle continued to pose a threat, reminding the town that danger could return at any moment. Eli did not seek confrontation unnecessarily, but he remained vigilant. He trained, prepared, and guided the community, ensuring that they could face future challenges without relying solely on fear or violence. The experience changed Eli profoundly. He began to see that his role in Silver Creek was not just to fight, but to teach, protect, and inspire. Courage was not about drawing a gun first. It was about making choices that honored life, integrity, and respect. Every interaction with Nayeli, every lesson shared with the townspeople, and every thoughtful decision he made strengthened both him and the community. Nayeli, too, grew through the experience. She had arrived in Silver Creek as an outsider, uncertain of how she would be received, and now she had become a respected figure, valued for her insight, intelligence, and bravery. The bond between her and Eli was one of mutual respect, grounded in understanding, shared experiences, and the recognition that true heroism often required difficult choices rather than bold gestures. As months passed, Silver Creek stabilized. The town recovered from the battle. The outlaws' threat diminished, and life regained a semblance of normalcy. Yet the lessons of that time were never forgotten. Eli's decision to refuse the town's reward became part of the collective memory. A story told quietly in the saloon, around hearth fires and in conversations between parents and children. It was a story not just of courage in battle, but of courage in character, and of the power of making the right choice even when it went against expectation. Through all of this, Eli remained humble. He never sought praise, recognition, or admiration. His satisfaction came from knowing that he had acted rightly, that he had respected Nayeli, and that he had guided the town toward a better understanding of strength, integrity, and justice. The true victory, he realized, was not in defeating the outlaws, but in helping Silver Creek grow into a community capable of facing danger with wisdom, courage, and unity. In the end, Part 4 of Eli's journey was not defined by a single battle, but by the ongoing process of growth and conflict, both external and internal. It was a period of reflection, teaching, and moral courage. Eli and Naeli's choices challenged the town's assumptions, reshaped its values, and left a legacy that would endure long after the dust settled.
The events tested not only physical bravery, but also the strength of character, demonstrating that the most meaningful victories are often those fought within the human heart and mind. By the time the sun set over Silver Creek, painting the sky in deep shades of orange and purple, Eli knew that the town was stronger than it had been before. He had faced challenges, guided a community through danger, and made decisions that honored both his principles and Naeli's freedom. Respect and integrity had been reinforced, and the town had begun to grow, not just in size or wealth, but in understanding and wisdom. And for Eli, that growth was the true reward. Time passed in Silver Creek, and life gradually settled into a rhythm, though the memory of the battle and its lessons lingered like a quiet shadow over the town. The streets, once tense and wary, now carried the sounds of laughter, conversation, and work. Children ran freely once more, chasing each other with sticks and balls, while merchants called out their prices and townspeople greeted one another with a sense of cautious optimism. The town had survived both external danger and internal conflict, and the experience had left a mark that would endure for years. Eli Thompson remained at the center of the town's life, not as a hero seeking recognition, but as a man quietly committed to guiding, protecting, and teaching. He moved through the streets with the same calm authority he had always possessed, helping wherever he was needed, whether it was repairing a fence, mending a roof, or advising a young man on how to handle a horse safely. The townspeople had come to rely on him not because he demanded it, but because his presence brought a sense of security, order, and wisdom. Naeli, too, had become an integral part of the community. She had arrived in Silver Creek during a moment of crisis, and now she stayed because she chose to, not because anyone expected it. Her courage, intelligence, and insight continued to shape the town in subtle ways. She worked alongside the women to teach children skills of observation, survival, and critical thinking, and she advised the town on matters of negotiation and understanding with nearby tribes. Her influence was quiet but powerful, helping the people of Silver Creek see the world with greater respect and empathy. Despite the calm, Eli knew that the frontier was never truly without danger. Rumors of outlaws persisted, and occasional travelers spoke of threats in neighboring territories. Yet the people of Silver Creek were no longer naive or unprepared. They had learned from their past, guided by Eli's careful teaching, that courage alone was not enough. State, wisdom, preparation, and unity were just as vital in ensuring survival. And Eli continued to cultivate these lessons not through fear or force, but through example. One evening, as the sun dipped low over the hills, casting golden light across the town, Eli sat outside the saloon, watching the town settle into quiet activity. He reflected on the journey that had brought him here, the early days of arriving in Silver Creek, the tense confrontation with outlaws, the moral challenge presented by the town's reward, and the ongoing work of helping the town grow into a safer, wiser community. He realized that each of these experiences had shaped not only the town, but also himself. He had faced tests of skill, courage, and morality, and each one had left him stronger, clearer in purpose, and more aware of the responsibilities that came with the life he had chosen. The town's gratitude toward Eli remained, though it had evolved into something deeper than material gifts or public recognition. The people admired him not only for his bravery in battle, but also for his steadfast moral compass. He had refused the town's misguided reward, not out of pride or stubbornness, but out of respect for Naeli and for his own principles. This decision had been a turning point, teaching the town that true heroism was not measured by trophies or recognition, but by the courage to do what was right, even when others did not understand. Naeli approached Eli as he sat quietly, a small smile on her face. She had come to appreciate the calm moments between action, the times when reflection and understanding were as important as skill and courage. "The town has changed," she said softly.
And so have we? Eli nodded, his eyes scanning the streets. They are learning, he replied. Not just about surviving, but about understanding. Courage is not just about facing danger. It's about knowing what's right and standing by it. That lesson will stay with them long after we are gone. Nayeli agreed, and for a moment the two shared the quiet satisfaction of knowing that their actions had made a difference. It was not the kind of satisfaction that came from recognition or reward, but from a deeper understanding that they had guided others toward growth, resilience, and integrity. The following weeks saw the town continue to prosper. Eli and Nayeli worked together to strengthen the community, not through control or authority, but by empowering the people. They helped organize better defense systems, trained young men and women in skills of observation and preparedness, and encouraged the town to value wisdom alongside bravery. Slowly, the culture of Silver Creek shifted. People began to see each other with greater respect, understanding that every individual had something valuable to contribute, whether in courage, intelligence, or moral insight. Through it all, Eli remained humble. He never sought to elevate himself above others, and he rarely spoke of his own achievements. His satisfaction came from seeing the town grow stronger and more self-reliant. He understood that true leadership was not about control, but about guidance and example. Every lesson he taught, every decision he made was meant to help the community thrive, not to bring attention to himself. The bond between Eli and Nayeli deepened, though it was founded not on ownership or obligation, but on mutual respect and understanding. They worked together as equals, each bringing strengths to the other, and in doing so, demonstrated to the townspeople that cooperation, trust, and shared wisdom were more powerful than any reward or prize. Their relationship became a living example of what the town could aspire to, a life guided by integrity, respect, and compassion. One afternoon, as Eli rode along the outskirts of town, he reflected on the journey that had brought him here. Remembered the early days of wandering the frontier, the harsh lessons of survival, and the countless choices he had made to uphold his principles. Each moment had led to this point, where he could see the tangible results of his actions, not in gold or praise, but in the strengthened bonds of a community and the respect of those he cared about. He also thought of the townspeople who had grown and learned through the challenges they had faced. Children who had once hidden in fear now ran freely, carrying lessons of courage and wisdom. Young men and women learned to observe, think critically, and act responsibly. Elders who had questioned his decisions came to see the value of principle over tradition, understanding that integrity and respect were just as important as strength. The town, once defined by fear and uncertainty, had become a place of resilience and hope. Eli's choices, Nayeli's guidance, and the collective courage of the people had transformed Silver Creek into a community capable of facing whatever challenges the frontier might bring. It was a transformation not of wealth or power, but of character, understanding, and shared responsibility. As the sun set on another day, Eli stood at the edge of town, looking out over the hills and plains that stretched endlessly before him. The wind carried the scent of dust, grass, and distant fires, reminding him of the vastness and unpredictability of the world. Yet he felt a sense of peace, knowing that Silver Creek was stronger, wiser, and more prepared for the future than it had ever been. In that moment, Eli understood the true meaning of his journey. Heroism was not about defeating enemies or receiving rewards. It was about standing by one's principles, protecting the vulnerable, and guiding others toward growth and understanding. Courage was not simply the absence of fear, but the ability to act rightly in the face of it. And leadership was not about control, but about example, teaching, and inspiring others to find strength within themselves. Nayeli joined him, and together they watched the last rays of the sun disappear behind the hills. The town lay quietly below, alive with the soft sounds of life continuing. Children's laughter floated in the distance, merchants closed their shops, and families gathered for the evening meal. It was ordinary yet extraordinary, a testament to resilience, courage, and moral strength. Silver Creek had endured not only because of skill with a gun or the luck of survival, but because of choices made with integrity, respect, and wisdom. Eli and Nayeli had shaped not just the outcome of a single battle, but the character of an entire community. The lessons learned during that time would endure for generations, quietly guiding the town in ways both seen and unseen. Eli knew that his time in Silver Creek, though not permanent, would leave a lasting legacy. He had faced external threats, moral dilemmas, and the complexities of human judgment, and he had emerged with both his principles and humanity intact. The town, too, had grown, learning to value courage, wisdom, and respect over tradition and expectation. As night fell and stars began to appear in the vast open sky, Eli felt a sense of completion. The journey that had brought him here, from a wandering cowboy to a guiding force in a frontier town, had reached its natural resolution. Life would continue, with its challenges, joys, and lessons, but the foundation had been set. Silver Creek would endure, and its people would carry forward the values that Eli and Nayeli had helped to instill: courage, integrity, respect, and the wisdom to choose what is right even when it is difficult. And in that quiet, starlit moment, Eli Thompson understood that the true reward was not gold, recognition, or any gesture of gratitude, but the knowledge that one had made a difference, that lives had been protected, and that a community had been guided toward a brighter, wiser future. But it was a reward that could never be taken, bought, or given. It was the reward of living rightly, with courage and integrity, and leaving the world a little better than it had been.